Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome to our live webinar on live immigration Q&A. My name is Sisha Maharaj, and I'm a senior consultant with Devant. And I'm joined here by the partner, Elizabeth Long, with Long and Manji. And today we're going to have a great session where you're going to learn all about your Q&A questions around immigration. Next slide, please. So just some logistics before we start. Just wanted to let you know that this is a webinar presentation, so you are muted. There's no need to use your video, so you can sit back and relax. However, we are welcoming your questions through the Q&A. So please post your questions using the Q&A function at any time. In my experience, this has been a very popular session. So as you have questions, please feel free to go through the Q&A, and you don't have to wait till the end. I would also encourage you to post your questions in a general fashion so that Elizabeth can answer for you, and it will be relevant to the audience. If you have specific questions, she might follow up with you separately on those, or those may require, a consultation with Elizabeth. Next slide. So a little bit about Devant. So for those of you who are new to Devant, welcome. Devant is here to help students and graduates get hired in Canada. We help students succeed as we do help students with their questions around work and employment. So welcome. We have about 25,000 students or job seekers from across Canada. We also work with 30 or more employers, and we partner with universities and colleges across Canada. We're at over 25 universities and colleges at this time. And we also have live expert career development events, and we've been offering this virtually since 2019. Next slide. Thank you. So without further ado, I'm really excited to introduce a very great colleague of mine for many, many years, Elizabeth Long. Elizabeth is a leading immigration lawyer in Canada. She's an active advocate of immigrant and refugee rights, and frequently presents and advises on immigration issues to organizations, universities, members of parliament, unions, and the media. She's also testified several times before the Parliamentary Standing Committee on Citizenship and Immigration on various immigration policies. Thank you so much, Elizabeth, for being here. You give such generous time to support students for many years. We're very fortunate to have you here. And Elizabeth's background, she holds a Juris Doctor law degree from the University of Toronto and a Bachelor of Arts degree with honors in psychology from Memorial University of Newfoundland. She also holds a Master of Law degree from Osgoode Hall Law School at York University, where she focused on the intersection between immigration and labor and employment law for foreign workers. Elizabeth has been certified by the Law Society of Ontario as a specialist in citizenship and immigration law, a prestigious list of which only approximately 65 lawyers in all of Canada belong. She's also an executive committee member of the Ontario Bar Association, Citizenship and Immigration Law Section, and a past executive committee member of the Refugee Lawyers Association. Elizabeth speaks English and Mandarin. Elizabeth, again, thank you so much for being here, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to be here with you guys. All right, guys, today what we're going to really focus in on is ways to extend your work permits in Canada. And before I go into the work permits, I always like to start with some of the basic things all of you need to know if you are an international student or if you are on work permits, because as international students, as international workers, you are temporary residents. And one of the most important things you need to know is how to keep yourself in status. Now, all of you guys, if you have a study permit, you have a work permit, there's going to be an end date on your document, on your study permit or work permit. Make sure you know what that date is. Make sure you have many, many reminders on your calendar about what that date is, okay? Now, let's say my study permit is going to expire at the end of this year, December 31st. Now, I might want to stay longer. Maybe my study program is not ending in December 31st, okay? So if it is that I want to study further beyond December 31st and my study permit ends on December 31st, if I filed an extension within Canada, in Canada, not outside in a visa post, in Canada, to extend my study permit in Canada before December 31st, as long as I have applied properly, my status continues on. I have what is called implied status or maintained status, continues until a decision is made. Okay, so let's say I filed my study permit extension December 30th. Now the website, the IRCC website says that, oh, you should apply 30 days before. That is just a recommendation. That is not the law. The law is as long as you file it before it expires, you have implied status, you can stay and continue to study until a decision is made. Let's say a decision isn't made until the end of February 28th, okay? So I have status, I can continue to study until February 28th. Hopefully they'll issue my study permit then, and then I can continue on. Now, if I forgot, okay, let's say I'm celebrating New Year's and I completely forget, and then January 1st, I wake up with a hangover, I have a distinct feeling something is wrong. And you know what it is? Oh, shoot, I forgot to extend my study permit. Now, what do I do then? What can I do then? Well, you have a second chance, and that is called restoration of status, okay? You only have two chances. You don't really have a third chance. Now, the restoration, I have 90 days from the date that I lost my status to file the restoration. Now, just because I filed the restoration, if I file it on January 1st, the day after my study permit ended, it doesn't mean that I can continue to study. You can only get implied status if you filed before it ended. So because I filed it a few hours late, okay, if I filed it before the clock struck midnight, right, on December 31st, I would have been fine. But because I filed it a few hours late, I do not have the right to continue to study. I don't have to leave the country. If I file the restoration, I can stay and wait for the decision, but I don't have the right to continue to study. I would probably lose that semester until a study permit comes. Now, what happens if, when I filed the study permit, let's say I filed it let's say I filed it on December 30th. Okay, I filed it in time, but oh, I made a mistake. I uploaded the wrong passport. I uploaded my old passport by accident, and the officer came back and say, no, I'm denying your application because you don't have a valid passport. And let's say I get that decision on February 28th. On what day did I lose my status? I lost my status if I filed properly on February 28th. And so the restoration starts on February 28th. Okay? So first thing you want to do is to make sure, if you have a study permit or work permit, you circle that date very, very carefully on your calendar, or, you know, have a lot of reminders on your phone, and make sure that you keep yourself in status. All right, now I'm going to go into a few things about studying and working on a study permit. First of all, just because your study permit is still valid, it does not mean that you cannot lose your student status beforehand. In order to keep your status as a student, you must actively pursue studies, okay? Otherwise, you lose your status in 90 days. There are two exceptions to the rule. One is if you're on scheduled breaks. These are breaks that are on the academic calendar, like summer breaks, spring break, etc. Okay, that's fine. Or if you have a personal circumstance, okay, let's say I suddenly got COVID and I just can't go to school, okay? Well, I can then go to the school and say, I can't go this semester. Please give me authorized leave so I can take the entire semester off on authorized leave. You can get authorized leave up to 150 days, just one semester, okay? And that, if you have authorized leave, that is still counted as actively pursuing studies. Now, also working while you're studying. You can only work while you are a full-time student. If you're a part-time student, unless it's in your last semester, you cannot work at all. Once you've completed your studies, okay, you cannot work. Once they notified you that you completed your studies, you are no longer a student at that time. You have to stop working at that time. We're going to talk about post-grad work permits. When you apply for your post-grad work permit, then you can start working if it's applied at the proper time, okay? The only exception to that where you have to stop working while you stop studying is if you completed one program and you're going to start a new program within, like after one semester, within 150 days, and that new program you've already been accepted to. Then you can work in between those two programs if it's one semester. All right, let's talk about the post-grad work permits. The post-grad work permit, the first question, you should ask yourself is not necessarily how do I apply for a post-grad work permit, is should I apply for post-grad work permit? Because you can only qualify for a post-grad work permit once in your lifetime. Now, some of you may say, well, my friends were able to extend their post-grad work permit this year, last year, and the year before. Yes, there have been temporary policies by the government to allow people to extend their post-grad work permits, but these are temporary policies. This is because the government is trying to rectify some issues within the immigration system. This is not necessarily going to be in place next year. And you cannot count on it being in place next year because the rule is that you're only supposed to qualify for one post-grad work permit in your lifetime. So the length of the post-grad work permit will coincide with the length of your program if it's under 2 years. So if you have a 1-year program or a 16-month program and it's not 2 academic years, then you only get a work permit for that length of time. If you have a 2-year program, you get a 3-year work permit. If you have a 1-year program or a 1-year program, you'll get so 1 year plus 1 year equals a 3-year post-grad work permit. Why is this important? It's because the post-grad work permit is really, and you'll see when we talk about extending work permits, you will see that the post-grad work permit is really something that is very special, okay? Most of the time, if you don't have the work permit, to extend it, it's going to be very hard for most of you, maybe impossible, okay? We'll go through some of the ways. And if you don't qualify, you're not going to get another post-grad work permit. So most of the time, when someone comes to my office, we are there to see whether or not, how can we have a plan so that a person can get permanent residence within the period of having the post-grad work permit, okay? So one other thing to keep in mind, the post-grad work permit, in order to qualify for it, you have to have maintained full-time status at the school during every semester of your program, except in the last semester you can do part-time, or if you have authorized leave where you take the entire semester off, okay? Otherwise, if you go part-time, let's say, I've had a lot of people come to me where they said, oh, my grades weren't too good in one course. I think I might have failed if I kept on, so I just dropped it. If you do that, then you may forfeit your ability to have the post-grad work permit. I would rather have a person show on their transcripts that they failed a course, but they did attend the classes, they failed a course, instead of having a person only have 3 courses in one semester, making them drop down to a part-time student in one of the semesters, okay? Now, when should you apply for the postgrad? This is very important. The rule that I want you guys to keep in mind is that you should apply for the postgrad the earlier of, if your study permit is going to expire before 90 days, you apply before your study permit expires. Or if your study permit expires after the 90-day period, when you first receive the notice that you've completed your program, 90 days is your deadline. This is different from the IRCC website, which says 180 days. Technically, you can apply for a postgrad work permit 180 days, but for most of you, if you just applied, your postgrad work permit will be rejected. Why is that? It's because a person loses their student status when 90 days after they've completed their studies. And in order to qualify for a postgrad work permit, you have to have a valid study permit, okay? And so in order to do that, in order to apply, let's say 170 days, what we would have to do is file a restoration of status for the study permit. It gets very, very messy. We only do that as a last resort. There's a second disadvantage to applying after 90 days. It's most of you will want to work while waiting for your work permit, because your work permit may take around 4 or 5 months to obtain. And you probably might want to find a job and start working before you get your work permit. So if you apply within 90 days of your completion and when your study permit is still valid, you can start working right away after you apply, but only apply within that timeline. You can start working right away after you've applied, okay? All right, now I'm going to go briefly about the temporary policy to extend the postgrad work permit. If some of you guys already hold a postgrad work permit that is going to expire before the end of this year, okay? And so the postgrad work permits that expired between September 20th, 2021 to the end of this year, then you can access this policy to extend your postgrad work permit for 18 months, okay? You have to apply between April 6th and the end of this year. And if you had lost your status between September 20th, 2021 and now, you can actually file a restoration of status. So this is beyond the 90 days, okay? They're allowing a special exception for you to do that. Also, the government has been sending out emails called the interim work authorization, so that even people who don't have valid work permits during this time, you guys can work until May 31st of 2024. However, this email, this interim work authorization allows you to work, but it does not give you temporary status. So when, if any of you are looking to apply under express entry, in order to count those days for Canadian work experience, you have to have temporary legal status. So this interim work authorization, you don't have your work permit that's valid, it won't count for points for express entry. All right, now let's talk about the different types of work permits. Work permits, there are different kinds of categories for work permits. And work permits, the main 2 categories are the open work permits, where you can work for anyone you want, and the employer-specific work permits, where you can only work for an employer that is specified on your work permit. So some of the types of open work permits that are available: postgrad work permit, right? A spousal work permit. Who's your spouse? A spousal work permit is someone who is married or is in a common law relationship with someone who has an employer-specific work permit and a job offer, or a post-grad work permit and a job offer, or other work and a job offer, and is the spouse of that person. Or if that person has a study permit, they can also get a spousal work permit. So a common law relationship, we all know if someone's married, they're married, right? But a common law relationship in immigration law is for people who have lived together in a conjugal relationship for at least 1 year. Only 1 year, okay? Now, it's very important that you mark your anniversary for living together for 1 year, okay? Not just because it's romantic, all right? It's because it means something in immigration law. So even if you don't think it's romantic, even if you don't care, it's just like, even I don't even care if you love that person or you think you're in a very, marriage-like relationship. If you have lived with that person and it is in a conjugal relationship, immigration will count that as 1 year as a common law. So on your application forms, they will always ask you, what is your marital situation? It will say common law. Are you in a common law relationship? If you have been living with someone for at least 1 year in a conjugal relationship, then you have to say yes. Otherwise, it's misrepresentation. Okay. We're going to go into some of those family relationships in the next seminar in next month in October 25th. All right. So the IEC working holiday work permit, that is for certain people, young people under 30, depending on the country, some under 30, some under 35. And you can get working holiday open work permits, but you have to enter a lottery to do that. And you have to be from certain countries. Then we have humanitarian open work permits for people from certain countries as well. And then the bridging work permit is there for people who, if you have, for example, for express entry, you have received an invitation to apply and you have submitted your application, then you'll get an acknowledgement of receipt. And if you already have a work permit or have a work permit that's within restoration period, you can apply for another work permit to allow you to work while waiting for the PR. So that bridging work permit is available for provincial nomination programs and other kinds of immigration programs, permanent residence programs, where you've progressed to a certain stage, and then you can get a bridging work permit at that point. Okay, now let's talk about the other kinds of work permits. Okay, so I've included in here just some of the different kinds of employer-specific work permits. So employer-specific work permits, okay, we have two kinds. We have the LMIA-based, and we have what's called International Mobility Program, IMP-based, okay? Now, why is it what's the advantage of having an employer-specific work permit? Well, sometimes you just can't get another open work permit, okay? But sometimes, even if I have clients who, even though they have a post-grad work permit, it's not going to expire anytime soon, they still want to apply for an employer-specific work permit or LMIA. Why is that? It's because right now, the points for express entry, we did a session last month about express entry, and it's recorded. So if you guys wanted to take a look, it's recorded there as well. But the arranged employment points for express entry, they'll give you 50 points for most people if it's a high-skilled job, and 200 points if you're executive manager. Okay, most of you will get the 50 points. The 50 points can be very significant if you wanted to be selected for express entry. Okay, so the open work permits will not give you the 50 points for arranged employment for express entry. In order to have arranged employment, you not only have to have the employer-specific work permit, and we'll talk about that, but you also need to have a long-term job offer. So it should be at least a year after you get PR, which is around 18 months, because it takes around 6 months for express entry. Okay, so 18 months from the time that you submit your permanent residence, not when you put yourself into the pool. After you get the invitation to apply and you submit your application, you need at least 18 months. If it's permanent, fantastic, but at least the 18 months job offer. Now, there's 3 scenarios for arranged employment. First of all, you can get an arranged employment LMIA. And with an arranged employment LMIA, it's a specific kind of LMIA. You don't even need a work permit. That itself will give you 50 points. If you have another LMIA, other kinds of LMIA, and you have a work permit based on the LMIA, that will give you 50 points. If you have a work permit that is not LMIA based, but it's still employer specific because it belongs to the IMP, International Mobility Program, and we'll talk about some of those programs that might work, you'll have to work for at least a year with that same employer, along with the work permit, before you can get the arranged employment points. All right, so let's take a deeper dive into the employer-specific work permits. You need to have a job offer from Canada. You can't get it from another country, and you can't just go and apply, okay? You have to work with an employer to do so. So with the LMIA, okay, there are regular LMIAs, high wage, low wage, whatnot, but most of those kind of LMIAs, they require the employer to try to recruit Canadians and show how they can't find another Canadian for the position. You know, right now there is a labor shortage, so we are able to do this for many people, but I have to tell you, employers do not like to do this. It may not be easy, number one, to find an employer who wants to do this, and 2, if your position is something that is not something that there is a labor shortage for, even if we applied for the LMIA, the employer may not be able to get the LMIA granted, okay? Now, there's a second kind of LMIA. It's called the Global Talent Stream, or the GTS. And it's mostly for tech workers. There's some other engineers in there now, where the employer does not need to recruit Canadians. They bypass that. But they need to provide a labor market benefit plan, which shows that they're going to hire Canadians in the next few years. They're going to train Canadians, etc. Okay, so that's a lot easier to do for most employers. So if you're a tech worker, this could be something that we can certainly discuss with your employer. You do need this is an employer-based application. It's the employer's application to do. So you certainly need your employer to be on board to do this. And then we have the International Mobility Program. So let's talk about the IMP. All right, so the IMP program is something where the employer does not need to apply for LMIA first, which is very nice for most employers, okay? They just need to file an offer of employment registration with the government, which registers what your working conditions are. What are you going to be paid? You know, what are your duties, right? What's your salary? How many hours of work? This is just to prevent abuse for employers, from employers for later on. So the employers may get audited later on, where they have to provide proof that they have met the working conditions that they have filed. But that's all. It's, you know, we file it. It takes a few minutes for the system to automatically approve. Okay, much simpler than the LMIA. But what kind of work permits can you get under the IMP? So for some people, if you're from countries, I've listed some of the countries here. If you're nationals of these countries, all right, then, and you are a professional, and every country has their own list of professions, then we can apply for a work permit that bypasses the LMIA. The Francophone mobility, and this is actually, the criteria has gone down by a lot. So Francophones, right now are defined as anyone who can speak and listen to the CLB of 5, level 5, okay? And you can, as long as you have a job outside of Quebec, it doesn't even need to be high skilled now, as long as it's like you don't have, it's not in a primary agriculture occupation, you can get a work permit because of your ability in French. Okay, now you can get a work permit for low skilled work. However, that may not translate into permanent residence, and we'll have another session talking about permanent residence other than express entry. You know, with express entry, if you went to my last session, it has to be high skilled, right? But this high skilled, low skilled, if you have that job offer, we can apply for a work permit for you very, very easily if you speak French. You lucky French speakers, okay? Young professionals class. So this is similar to the working holiday work permit. This is also for people from certain countries under the IEC, okay? If you have a job offer, so what happens with the international experience class is people from certain countries, you can go in you can put yourself into a pool, and then the government has draws where they invite people to apply. And it depends on how many people are in the pool as to how likely it is for you to get invited. Now, the working holiday work permits, there might be a lot of people applying because for those, you don't actually need a job offer. But for the young professionals, you do need to have a job offer in Canada. So if you already have a job offer and you are under the age and you are from certain countries, there's most of the European countries are there. And then there's Chile is in there, Korea, Taiwan, Hong Kong. So if you are in Japan, so you know, and the list, there's a whole bunch of lists. But if you are one of those from one of those countries, then this might be a good option as well. All right, so we have talked for a while, and I just wanted to give you some final pieces of advice, okay? So first of all, you need to have a plan as to what you're going to do to reach your immigration goals. What I've talked about is just to give you a sense of some of the things that are out there, but it's really the tip of the iceberg. Don't just go around thinking, oh, if my friend did this, I can do it too. Even if your friend has the exact same circumstances as you, and I will say likely they probably wouldn't, okay? But even if they did, if they had applied at an earlier time, even say a month or two ago, that is going to be a different system than for you, okay? And so you need to understand and have a plan for your own individual situation. Now, when you have a plan, you need to make sure that you will do what you need to do to get there. It might not be that easy. You may have to study really hard for those IELTS or CELPIP exams, right? You may need to do another program. You may need to find another job, okay? It is going to take some effort for most of you, but if you try hard, I will say that most of you, you've already come so far to study in this brand new country. You have gone far more, you know, you have done so much more than most people have in this entire world as immigrants. And so I really do hope that you continue to do what you need to do to get there. The third thing I want to tell you is please don't take what you might think is an easy way out and go and misrepresent. There's a lot of people in the immigration field that prey on desperation. And they will say, you give me $10,000, you give me whatever, and I'll make it happen for you. Don't worry. If anybody says that to you and you don't know what they are doing, it's likely going to be fraud. Okay? Please don't do that, because what will happen is you're not going to be able to sleep at night for the rest of your life. If it is found out that you, even if it works, and if you are able to get your permanent residence or even get citizenship afterwards, if it is found out and these people are, there's crackdowns on them all the time, then your status will be taken away. Okay? And if you're found to have misrepresented, you will have a 5-year bar from applying for permanent residence in Canada. Okay? And also make sure you stay in status. All right? That's one of the first things I told you guys, stay in status, because if you're out of status, it could be very, very difficult to keep you in Canada and apply for applications for permanent residence, etc., temporary residence, in order for you to stay in Canada. Now, hopefully you would have hired a good lawyer who you don't have your application rejected. If your application is rejected, though, make sure you contact a lawyer right away. Don't just, think about, consultants who don't have any legal background. They're not allowed to go into federal court. Only a lawyer is able to do so. There are very specific timelines to go to federal court as well, okay? If you have a decision decided outside of Canada, it's 60 days. If it is inside Canada, it's only 15 days to file with the federal court. And, if you go and write to immigration yourself, you only get one chance for a reconsideration, okay? If you go and write and you don't really know what to say, and they say no, and then you go to a lawyer like me who you say, oh, Elizabeth, can you do something now? It may be too late, because I only have, you only have one chance to ask for a reconsideration, okay? There's also timelines for, applying for postgrad work permits, etc. So make sure that as soon as the application is rejected, you contact a good lawyer right away. All right, that's all I have for my presentation. Sisha, let's get on some questions here.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. So much great information that you shared today. The questions are rolling in. I'm just sort of sorting through some of the questions. So thanks everyone for your questions. Just a reminder, please use the Q&A feature to ask your questions. Elizabeth is here for a number of minutes still. So now is your chance. Let's start. So Elizabeth, we have a few questions here related still to the 90-day period. I know you explained it already. I think students are still trying to grasp and understand that. So do you mind maybe re-explaining the 90-day window for applying once more, maybe with a specific example? I have someone actually that has an example, so maybe we can answer two of these at the same time. So we have a student who's saying that she took 1 semester off, an authorized break, to give birth to her baby. Congratulations. And her study permit expires on April the 4th, and she will be graduating the end of May. So when is the best time for her to apply for an extension of a study permit? And how much POF do I need for this application? So we have one question around, can you please re-explain the 90 days window for reapplying? And then we have this specific question as well.
Okay. All right. So just with regard to the person who is, whose study permit expires before the study program ends, go and file the extension right away for your study permit, okay? Because in order to work while waiting for your postgrad work permit, you can't be on implied status. You have to hold a valid study permit. So go and apply for your study permit right away. With regard to the timeline, let's look at this. Okay, so If I am going for exams, I'm still a student. I can work, because I'm a full-time student, right? When my exams are over, I don't have my grades yet, still a full-time student, right? So I can continue to work. When the school tells me, congratulations, you have completed your program, hooray, am I a full-time student then? No, I am not. At that point is when I have to stop working, okay? I can start working again once I have filed my post-grad work permit. Now, my post-grad work permit, the length of time for me to file my post-grad work permit has to be, number one, before my study permit expires. Okay, I can file the post-grad work permit if I'm on implied status by applied for a study permit extension. Yes, I can apply then, but I cannot work in that situation. So try to have your study permit not expire. Normally, the officers are supposed to issue the study permit for 90 days after a program ends to allow a person to apply for a post-grad work permit, but sometimes they don't. Okay, whatever it is, you have to you should apply for your post-grad work permit before your study permit expires. And also, if your study permit goes beyond the 90 days, let's say I finished my program end of this year, December 31st, just to make it easy, right? And let's say the 90 days from that is what, March 31st or April 1st or whatnot, okay? So if my study permit expires February 1st, what's my deadline? February 1st. If my study permit expires April 30th, what's my deadline? March 31st, because 90 days from the date that I got the completion letter from the school. Okay, so whichever comes first, that's how it works. All right.
Thank you so much. We've got lots of questions here, so I'm going to keep going. Okay, Elizabeth, thank you so much. So similar to, we've got another post-grad work permit question. So if you are on a post-grad work permit and you apply for PR, if you qualify, what happens if the post-grad work permit expires before you get your acceptance or rejection of PR?
Right. So temporary status is not, it's you have to have it running parallel to your permanent residence. If your temporary status expires and you are in Canada without status, that can affect your ability to get permanent residence because you're illegally in Canada. Okay, so you have to continue on maintaining your permanent residence. Maintain your temporary status until you get permanent residence. Unless you can leave the country, if you still qualify for permanent residence, right? If you have received your invitation to apply. But remember, just because you put yourself into the pool, it doesn't mean that you have actually applied for permanent residence. Okay.
Okay. And I would just encourage, that question came from Jacqueline. Jacqueline, thank you for your question. Feel free to reach out to Elizabeth directly to ask more questions. I would encourage you all to do that if you have specific questions. I do see some specific questions coming in, so I'm just trying to sort through another one for you here. Okay,
I'm putting it in our contact information for our law firm. If you want to schedule a consultation, please let us know you're coming from a Devant seminar, and we will give you the student discount as well, okay, for the consultation.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you, Elizabeth. So we have some questions around the CRS score calculator. So under the calculator, there's one question about a valid job offer supported by the LMIA. I know you explained a little bit about MIA. This student didn't understand the last condition of the valid job offer that said 1 year from the time you became a permanent resident. Can you please explain?
Not 1 year from the time shouldn't be 1 year from the time you became. Oh, okay. So it's the job offer for the arranged employment. The government wants to, what is arranged employment? Arranged employment means that the government says that you have a job offer for when after you get permanent residence. So you're going to be well settled in Canada because you have this job offer. That's the whole meaning of arranged employment. Okay. And so to satisfy this requirement, the government says you have to have this job offer for at least a year after you have permanent residence in order to get the arranged employment points. So why is it 18 months? It's because when you apply for express entry, it normally takes 6 months for express entry to run its course and get you PR. So 6 months plus 12 months is 18 months. Okay. So if you, some people have, for example, if I was a postdoc, some people have these postdoc situations. Let's say you're a PhD student, and then afterwards you get a postdoc program, right? You can get postdoc work permits, which are employer specific, but there's a lot of issues with postdocs getting arranged employment points because sometimes they only have a contract for 1 year. You only have a contract for 1 year, and when you're applying, you're already 6 months into it. Well, you don't really have a job offer for a year and a half from the time of application. That is going to be problematic when you want to claim arranged employment points.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we have a queue of questions. Another question is, if this student has a visitor visa holder applying for a study permit inside Canada, what is the procedure? Is the person required to follow a preliminary course such as English? So it sounds like this person is in Canada on a visitor's visa.
Yeah.
Interested in applying. So what is the procedure?
So if you have a visitor status, you have to apply for your first study permit. If you're on a work permit, you can apply for study permit inside Canada. If you're a study permit, you can apply for a study permit inside Canada. If you're a visitor, you have to apply for your first study permit at a visa post. Doesn't mean that you have to leave Canada. You have to submit online, and the form has to be apply for a study permit outside of Canada, and it will be decided by the visa post, and the visa post will then give you a study permit approval letter, and then you have to go to the border to activate the study permit at that point.
Okay, thank you. So Chris has a question. Can one apply for PR with a spousal open work permit after working a full-time job, not permanent, for 12 months?
Well, maybe. I'd have to sit down with you and go over the entire situation and see. But, oftentimes, it doesn't have to be, if you're the student, it doesn't have to be you yourself that is the permanent, is the principal applicant. Oftentimes you work together with your spouse. You get your spouse the spousal work permit because you're a student, and they can work and perhaps be the principal applicant. But I'd have to sit down with you, and I want to sit down with you and your wife together and discuss your situation together.
Okay, thanks, Elizabeth. So Chris, that was your answer. We have another interesting question here. This student, Darshan, this is Darshan's question. I recently completed my studies. My study permit expires on July 2026, and I've already applied for my postgrad work permit. My visas are valid until December 2028. Can I visit the USA during the first 2 weeks of October?
Okay, this is a lot of math. I don't really know if I want to calculate all this right now. I'm just gonna say generally, okay. If you have applied for your postgrad work permit in Canada and you still have status, okay, that means that you're not on implied status. That means if you want to come back, you're coming back within 90 days and you still have a valid study permit, you're coming within 90 days of the completion of your program, that may not be such an issue. But if you go after the 90 days so that you don't have student status anymore, and your study permit is expired and you want to come back, your implied status ends when you leave Canada. So you don't necessarily want, oftentimes it can, if you don't need to go and travel, don't travel. But if you really need to travel, come back before your student status ends. Before that 90 days ends, and while you still have a study permit, then you're okay. You should be okay. They should let you in at the border. But afterwards, there could be a whole load of issues. You may not be able to work while waiting for your work permit. And two, your work permit itself, technically speaking, they're not supposed to grant it to you if they know you've left the country, because it's supposed to be over after you left the country. So, not recommended to come back after you've lost your student status.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. You've been very generous with that specific question. There's lots of questions here. I'm just reading through them. Someone's asking about when do I start the process? I know for my post-grad work permit. So it seems to be still a little bit of confusion around the post-grad work permit. So this student, their course ends in December, but the permit expires in April 2024. So when can they apply for the post-grad work permit?
Right. So in that case, I think we talked about that 90 days, right? If your study permit expires after 90 days, after the 90-day period, then it's 90 days from the date that you receive that first indication from the school that you have completed your program. Don't wait until the 90 days. You can apply anytime before the 90 days. A lot of you guys will want to apply as soon as possible because you will want to start working as well. Okay, the deadline is the 90 days.
Great. So for the individual who asked that question, as Elizabeth said, if as soon as you receive your completion, apply. Don't wait for the 90 days. Just apply as soon as you get confirmation that you have received completion of your studies. Just please apply for your post-grad work permit.
Yeah, I mean, the only caveat I would say is sometimes people, if they only have a 1-year post-grad work permit and they haven't found a job yet, sometimes you may want to delay a little bit. It just depends on the circumstances. And people often say, well, when should I come? Should I come after I've done my, IELTS? Should I come after I've found a job? Really come earlier, as early as possible. I like to see people before they even come and study in Canada, because planning as to, don't apply after you've applied for your postgrad work permit and you only have a postgrad work permit for 1 year and you don't have a job and then you don't know what to do after the 1 year is over, plan as early as possible.
So building on that 1 year, thank you for that explanation. We've got a question here. Do I have enough time to qualify for the Canadian Experience class if I'm only entitled to a 1-year post-grad work permit?
Maybe, maybe not, right? I don't know if you have a job, if you found a job, when you would find a job. And so it sometimes can be a very precarious situation if you're in the situation where you haven't found a job yet and you're only entitled to a 1-year postgrad work permit. Now, if you were to do another program, 1 + 1 = 3 in this case. If you do 1-year program plus another 1-year program, you get a 3-year work permit at the end. So, that's something where, the great thing about working with Devant is, immigration and finding job come hand in hand, right? And it really depends on, getting your permanent residence really, really depends on that job offer.
And thanks for making that connection with Devant. So for students on the call here and who are new to Devant, we offer supports where you can actually upload your information, your resume. We can help you with, improving your interview skills. And we also have connection with employers. So once you're into the system and you have uploaded your information, we also have job postings and we also offer hiring events as well for you. So we can talk a little bit more about that in a minute, but thanks for making that connection, Elizabeth. So yeah. I'm still getting a lot of questions in here.
Yeah,
and I know
I think we're running out of time. Let's do one last question. And then if you guys want to join us next month, I'll be going through these things about the postgrad, and every session I do talk about students and postgrad because I know everybody needs to know this. But the next time we're going to concentrate on families. Who you can bring with your family, whether you should apply together, and then if you want to sponsor people afterwards, who you can sponsor as well. But one last
Thank you. One last question. Okay,
one
so
last
this one, I
question.
think this
Yeah.
one's an important one, I think, as
Mhm.
well. So this student is saying that they've just graduated from a 2-year program, so they're entitled to a 3-year
Yeah.
postgraduate work permit, sorry. But their passport is just about to expire, so they only have 1.5 years remaining. So what
Mhm.
do they do? Apply for the postgrad work permit or renew the passport before applying for the postgrad work permit?
Yeah, it depends. So make sure you will apply for your postgrad work permit within the time, within the deadline. If you can't get your passport extended before the deadline, you can always submit your application. If you get a new passport before they issue the work permit, you can try to update your application to say, hey, I now have a new passport. And if the officer sees it in time, they give you the 3 years. If they don't, if you can't get your passport renewed, before your work permit, they'll issue it for the length of your passport. And then afterwards, you can apply to extend your work permit for the full 3 years afterwards as well. But you'll have to pay another application fee for that.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. And just for everyone, I tried to get to all the questions, but there's so many coming in. So feel free to connect with Elizabeth directly and mention that you've been here at this webinar. And she can connect with you on your specific questions. I also just want to mention, keep learning with us. We offer regular webinars on different topics. Next week, we have a expert panel, careers in cybersecurity. We have a session on October the 11th, optimizing your LinkedIn presence, profile building, which is new. October 18th, we have the Devon Career Cafe, and Elizabeth is back for more immigration advice and Q&A. As she mentioned, it'll be a focus on families as well as family sponsorship. So I hope to see you there for our next set of sessions. I also have a quick poll. I would really love your feedback on this session today. If you could just take a moment, it'll just take 30 seconds to let us know, how would you rate this webinar? And you can just use your mouse to rate us. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. We would really love, to see you again. Please let your friends know as well, or if there's anyone in your class. We are partnered with universities and colleges across Canada. And if your university and college is a partner with Devon, you would get access to a number of career development services using our technology, as well as our practice sessions for interviews through our AI technology. And we also offer career coaching, as you can see, if you want to supplement, your career coaching and get advice around, things that you can do to help you in your employment and your career. You can always reach out to us as well for one-on-one coaching. We'd love to help you with your job search. So please connect with us. Again, my name is Sisha Maharaj. I'm a senior consultant with Devon. We're here to support you. And just to let you know that you have a whole ecosystem, of people, within the university and college sector here with Elizabeth Long and Mangoji, as well as through Devon. We're here to help you. We're here with you all the way. Thank you so much again. Have a good evening, everyone.
Thank you
Thank you
so
so
much,
much,
Trisha.
Elizabeth.
Take care, everyone.